Hello, and welcome to the Psych Leadership Podcast, the show that helps you understand the psychology of growth, leadership, and making big moves in your life and career. As always, my name is Luke Upchurch. I'm so glad that you took time out of your day to hang out with me and listen about the silent power of listening. If you recall, our last episode, we were talking about managing up. How do you push your boss to provide them feedback and at the same time to help make sure that we're not expecting them to be a person that they just aren't built to be, right? Well, building on that same concept here is the silent power of listening. So picture this. You're in this group project. This can be a classroom discussion, an internship meeting. Maybe it's just a new project at the new job that you just landed, right? Hopefully you're starting your 2026 with something new and fresh. You have an idea, you have a concern, a thought that could help the group, or maybe it even just makes sense to you, right? Maybe it's just a question, but you stay quiet. You're not sure if you should speak up. Your anxiety is getting the best of you. You're worried about being judged in that moment. Well, but initially, just you staying quiet there, at first, folks might think, well, that's the new person, right? They're just being quiet because they're in a state of ignorance, right? And ignorance isn't a bad thing. Whenever I start a new job, I'm quick to play that new guy card, right? But over time, that moves from being the expected outcome, right? They expect you to be quiet in the beginning, at least some folks do, but then it starts to get a little awkward, and then eventually it gets to the space of actually eroding trust, motivation, and even creativity. So that's kind of what we're starting to pull at today. We want to talk about why listening and it's not a being quiet isn't a bad thing, but we also don't want to go to the other direction either, right? We want to be real intentional with our listening. And that in and of itself can be a powerful tool that leadership can sometimes overlook. And so today we'll kind of dig into that a little bit. So what does good listening look like? And why does that matter? Well, when we say we're listening, we rarely mean just hearing. Real listening or active listening, empathetic listening, involves giving someone your full attention, acknowledging what they say, interpreting their tone, validating their feelings, and responding in a meaningful way. That kind of listening has real effects, right? So many of you, again, this is our target audience with this podcast is those that are new in their career. And so maybe you haven't experienced this a lot. But I can tell you that as you move up in your career, oftentimes you're in these meetings that, I'm in a meeting with you, but I'm also getting messages on the side. My Teams is blowing up. I have my boss asking about, the latest reports or status updates, things like that. So it becomes a challenge to zero in and truly focus on that individual. But if I can do that, if I can be a good listener, that really changes the dynamic. We talked about the idea that if I'm quiet and it looks like I'm listening but I'm really not hearing, that over time that goes from awkward to eroding trust. Well, the opposite is also true, right? If I show you that I'm a good listener, then it builds trust, and now we can work together. Now we're a team instead of me just being a fly on the wall. So back in 2020, there was this study of over 500 employees. Researchers found that when supervisors practice active, empathetic listening, employees reported significantly higher work engagement. It increases their energy, their dedication, their emotional investment in the job. Another recent meta-analysis reviewing decades of studies across many workplaces. This study concluded that perceived listening is strongly linked to positive outcomes. So it actually creates better relationships, improved emotional well-being, greater cognitive clarity, higher job performance, and fewer counterproductive behaviors. Ultimately, it's a more adaptive workplace behavior. So listening isn't just being nice, it's a psychological and organizational lever that can shape morale, performance, and creativity. So this is what I'm telling you there is that the science backs this concept of listening, and it helps not just the employee. It doesn't just help you, it helps the overall group. It also means that for those of you that are in those leadership positions, understanding this actually builds a space of psychological safety for your team. Now, if you don't know what psychological safety is, I'll encourage you to go back to some of my past episodes. I interviewed a good colleague of mine, Jason Schultz. We talked a lot about psychological safety and what that does to build a team, to unlock their intrinsic motivation, make the team collectively look better. And so I'd really encourage you to go back and check that out. But these concepts kind of go hand in hand. So let's talk a little bit more about some other examples. So listening, it's not just socially, it doesn't just help from a social perspective, but it also helps us from an emotional perspective as well as our cognition. So again, we touched on psychological safety there a minute ago, but from the employee perspective, when someone listens and truly listens, the speaker feels safe to express ideas without judgment or fear of being dismissed. So it lowers their overall stress, but it also increases their willingness to communicate honestly, right? So at that point, just the fact that you were actively listening, that you were not just being quiet to allow them to speak, but that you were ingesting the information, it gives them the permission space to say, okay, I've got their ears. They give a crap what I have to say, so now I'm going to say it. That folds right into trust and building relationships. So if we are consistent, attentive listening, that's going to build that relational trust. People feel valued, they feel seen, and over time, trust supports the better teamwork, collaboration, and commitment. When we talk about cognitive clarity, being heard and understood reduces mental clutter. And what I mean by that is, especially, early in career, I don't know about you, but I always feel that I'm in that space of I need to kind of prove myself, if that makes sense. And so again, if I'm expressing an idea and my boss is giving me that give and take, that asking questions, seeking to understand, that kind of stuff, it actually builds my self-esteem quite a bit, right? At that point, I feel like, okay, I can continue on. I've been given the permission space to do this, so why not take advantage of it? The added benefit here is that not only are we giving them that cognitive clarity, but we're actually tapping into a practice that's commonly seen in mentor-mentee type of relationships. The In that space, research into peer mentoring practices actually shows that participants would experience improved self-esteem and reduced social stress. From there, we have motivation engagement, right? So when people feel that they have been listened to, they're more likely to stay engaged. They contribute more, they go beyond the minimum, and they stay committed even when things are difficult. In short, listening transforms the workplace from a noise-filled area into communities of connection, belonging, and shared growth. And if you remember, we talked a while back about self-determination theory, right? We talked about the idea of three key elements being critical to unlock intrinsic motivation. That is acceptance, belonging, and competence, right? So if my boss allows me to speak, I have autonomy. If they hear my ideas and we have that back and forth, we have that trust and relationship building, I've got that cognitive clarity, that builds both competence as well as that overall social belonging. I feel that I should be here because you're giving me the space to say that I belong here, if that makes sense, right? Those two things go hand in hand. And I can't stress how valuable that is on any team. So, three moves that you can make right now. If you, and this is something I'd really like you to focus on for this week. I want you to give your full attention before a response. So we talked about this before. It's so difficult, especially in our remote environment, to put down distractions. But I'm going to encourage you to do that. And if you are in that space, maybe even turn on your camera. I tell my team this all the time. There's so much of our communication that is completely lost when I can't see your face. So turn on the camera, and you'll find, by the way, that if you get one or two people, if you can convince one or two people to turn on their cameras too, the dominoes will continue to fall. The peer pressure mounts. As long as two or three people are on their camera, pretty much everybody will turn it on. Nobody cares about your bedhead. It's fine, right? Blur your background if that's an issue. I will say I've seen an awful lot of folks that is distracting to me when I see the your laundry basket and your unmade bed behind you. Blur out your background, but turn on your camera. And then when we talk about removing those distractions, it's okay to put your Teams or Slack or whatever on do not disturb. Look at the speaker, make small gestures to let them know that you're listening. And it's okay to start jotting down questions. I don't know about you. I'm not a fan of when somebody asks me questions right in the middle of something. It kind of throws me off of my rehearsed presentation, and so I prefer to write down the questions and kind of put them at the end. So give them that courtesy. Give them your full attention. Don't break that trust by interrupting them. Jot down questions so that you can have something that is sort of evidence based that says, yes, I was listening to the point that I was connecting the dots. And then once you ask your question, I will also encourage you to pause long enough to let them reply. Let them completely finish their thought before you jump in. Okay? Building a little bit more on those questions, it's okay to seek to understand. And I really want you to come at it from that perspective. So in our last podcast, we talked about managing up, and we talked about the different five key areas that folks tend to you tend to have these different personality traits that sort of define who you are. If you haven't heard that podcast, go back and check it out. But one of the things that we talk about there is that some people are a little bit more open to new ideas than others. And if you understand your audience, you may also understand how open they are to being challenged or, to sharing those ideas. So if you come at them, if you come at that presenter with the mindset of I'm seeking to understand, I'm not challenging you, I'm just trying to get to the same headspace as you, right? That's completely different. So I typically will word it as, hey, can you help me understand what you meant by XYZ? Or what do you see as the priorities here? What is the problem statement that we are trying to solve? And it just helps them understand that, again, you weren't just quiet because you were checking out your, the latest trends on Facebook or social media or whatever, but that you were quiet because you were taking it all in. Next, I want you to make sure that you are intentional with your follow-up. So a quick message after the conversation, hey, thanks for sharing those ideas. I've been thinking about what you said. Here's how we can continue, etc. That follow-up builds trust, and it shows that you not only heard them, but that you took them seriously. So again, I'm looking at this from the perspective of if you want to lead without being a leader, these are great actions that you can take. If you're already a leader, it shows your team that, going back to that concept of psychological safety, even if I listen and I look like I'm engaged, if I never follow up, if I never ask you anything about it later, it probably fell on deaf ears, or at least that's what my self-doubt screams. Okay? So help your team to understand that, again, that your silence is not a sign of weakness, it is not a sign of disrespect, that being quiet meant that you were actually listening. Okay? So in closing here, folks, let's talk about a little bit more about why this matters. If you're early in career or you're still navigating those group projects, those internships, things like that, first off, I want you to know that listening can really give you an edge. I'd love to tell you, I know when I was in high school and in college, I always hated group projects. Was never a fan of that. The idea of pinning my success on somebody else. I'd love to tell you that that goes away when you get in the real world, but I'd be lying to you. There's always a group of folks that are working towards a collective goal. Even if you are in a role classified as an individual contributor, you're always going to need to lean on other folks. You will always have dependencies where your success rests on the shoulders of somebody else. And so being able to communicate with them effectively is a powerful thing in and of itself. That kind of quiet leadership, listening, understanding, and supporting, that builds relationships that will last beyond a job or a title, a class. It builds a reputation. And I know, at least in my career, I can't tell you how many times that group projects that I've been on have led to other opportunities. Right? You get to the end of that project, and the team with whom you were partnered says, you know what, you were so good at this, or you created such a culture on our team that I want you to be part of our team permanently. Right? So it opens doors for you. So in closing, listening isn't just pausing in between words. It is truly a strategy, a skill, and a rock solid leadership move. When you practice listening fully with your heart, with intent, you give people more than your ears. You're actually giving them safety, respect, clarity, space to grow. Essentially, if you're always talking, maybe they're not. Okay? So if this episode spoke to you, share it with a friend, someone that might need a reminder that the smartest thing you can do sometimes is just listen. And again, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear your stories of how listening has helped you further your career. All right, folks, we will talk soon. Have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.
Hey, you made it all the way to the end of the podcast. Thanks so much for your time today. If you like this content, I'm going to ask that you consider a small donation. Every little bit helps, but this allows us to continue not only doing the podcast, but actually offering the internship positions, the leadership conferences, as well as the in person courses that we deliver to high school and college students. Think about hitting the donation button for me. And again, we'll talk soon. Bye bye.